everybody, this is Virginia again here. I am sitting next to all of my reference collection of honey. These are all honeys, except for these little ones that I've collected from elsewhere, but everything else here on the table that you see, all these different colors from this very dark honey to these lighter honeys that you see, are all collected from our farm in Michigan. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about how to do a tasting. And so a couple years ago, I was lucky enough for my birthday, I went and attended the UC Davis Honey and Pollination Center to get certified in the sensory evaluation of honey. And so I spent 3 days working with a handful of people from all across the country that were just really into the honey business, very interested in flavor, and chefs and beekeepers, business people, all those different combinations to learn. And so I'm going to share with you just a few of the basic things that I learned about tasting. The first thing is honey, just like a wine, cheese, chocolate, olive oil, it has its own flavor profile. And so, you know, right away, the first thing that you can see when you look at all these honeys are that there's differences, right? There's differences between, let's say, these two colors of honey. So right away, that indicates that there's probably something different there. There's actually a scale that we use, the Fund Honey Color Guide, you can see that there, which you can use to kind of help classify where this color of honey fits into. And one of the things that people are trying to do across the world is to develop flavor profiles as well as other characteristics that really help to explain what honey, different types of honey are. And so, you know, honey is sweet. That's often something that you hear, but there's a lot more to it. There's a lot of little flavorful notes that you may taste and nuance. In the US, there's kind of 3 major varietal honeys that we often think of. One is clover honey, another is buckwheat honey. Both of those honeys are honeys that we are able to harvest from the farm. And then another is orange blossom honey. And so when Ben and I go on trips, we'll always collect a little bit of, kind of forage a little bit of the flavors that we taste locally. And this orange blossom honey was from Foley, Alabama, and Belle just loves it. But one of the reasons why we're really focusing on trying to identify these profiles for honey is, of all the foods where there are fakes and additives and things that are not what they say, honey is the #3 fraudulent food that's out there. And so when you go to the grocery store and you don't know the source of your honey, who knows? It may be cut with sugar or rice or corn syrup. It may have been heated. All of those things obviously change the flavor profile. So we're going to talk a little bit again about how to do it, how to identify and go through the sensory analysis. So back to color. So the first thing is we see the color. We see that there's a difference there. Anything may be very light and kind of what they call water white along this Fund scale, down to these kind of more amberish tones that you see, even kind of a red. I know you've got a honey that kind of shows up amber in the fall. It's a wildflower honey. And it's like, where did that color come from? And then all the way down here to this dark, dark amber color. So if you were to hold this buckwheat up in the light, what you would see is a lot of kind of those amber tones to it. So that's the first thing, just using your sight and looking at the color. The next thing that you do, and I'm gonna pull this buckwheat because I think that this is just such a delicious and unique honey. But the next thing that you do when you're looking and going through the profile analysis is aroma. And so this is talking about aroma outside of your body, out in the air. And what you do, you can take, it's really great if you have a little bit of honey, can warm it up. That kind of gets those volatiles up in the air and makes it really stronger to smell. But you get your honey, you give it a little stir, couple stirs, you give it a whiff. And right away, when I smell this buckwheat honey, a typical smell that people identify with it is kind of like a malty, wet saddle smell, as well as some cloves. Even maybe a little bit of cardamom and dark cherry in that honey, all right? And so that's the first piece, or the second piece, when we start to think about aroma. The next thing that we want to do is actually give it a taste. And so I think it's good to give it a couple tastes. The first one is just kind of a little dab, and you know, put that on my tongue. Wow. So right away, you get a feel for the texture. This has kind of a big crystal texture. It crystallized in the last year or so. But the flavor is also it lasts on my tongue compared to others. And so that's one thing. Does it last long, or does the flavor kind of dissipate really quickly? And so this one, it starts kind of sweet in the front of your mouth. Again, kind of tasting some of those fruity, dark cherries is what I would say. And then it kind of goes into the back of your tongue and has a nice bite to it that I would say some of that clove and spice comes from. But the sweetness is different. I wouldn't say it's as sweet and like a high note as, say, like maybe a clover honey. It's got more of a warmer flavor to it. And so, you know, the next time, get a little bit bigger stick, and this time you put it all over your mouth. I mean, over your gums, oh wow, over your whole mouth. So you can just feel it everywhere. And even with this one, besides the dark cherries and I'm getting a little bit of chocolate that goes along with it, and even maybe a little bit of stone fruit, like a little bit of plum in it. It's just buckwheat honey to me, if you really spend a little bit of time thinking about it and tasting it, it has just so much depth to it. So there's a lot of things that kind of come out along the way. So while I was tasting it though, I could also feel that texture that I was talking about. So honeys have different texture. And so, you know, some honeys are gonna be crystallized from the get-go. There's even honey that is crystal, it crystallizes inside the hive. All honey, for the most part, eventually does crystallize, but they'll crystallize at a different rate based on multiple properties that are related to the pollen, the nectar, even the soils, environments that the honey comes from. But the buckwheat honey has kind of a medium textured crystal. The finer the crystal, so there's some honeys out there that have super fine crystals that even have a little bit of a cooling effect on your mouth. And so that's a whole different, that's another texture classification that's related to specific types of honey. And then finally, like you want to feel and identify sort of that finishing flavor to it. And that's where, with the buckwheat, what I feel like left over in my mouth after those dark cherries and chocolates and cloves, I really get this nice malty barley, almost like a beer. It's not beer because I don't taste the bitter. Actually, buckwheat does have bitters in it, but it's covered by all those other flavors in it, just part of its chemistry. But I do get kind of a barley cherry kind of flavor. And so there's actually a honey flavor wheel. You've probably seen something like this, maybe if you're looking at coffee or wine, and you have this wheel where you're looking at fruity, there may be floral, herbaceous, woody, spicy, nutty, caramely, animal notes. Caramel, there's maybe a little bit of caramel, a little bit of coffee in that buckwheat as well. And so as you're getting to know the different notes that honey may have, you can kind of use that as a guide to help you. I think the hardest thing with doing tasting is we often don't use our words to describe what we're sensing, or maybe spend so much time thinking about it. But if you work on doing those things and sniffing your spices, sniffing things, even like a Band-Aid has kind of a plastic, there's honeys that you can sniff out like kind of metallic or plastic kind of synthetic scents to them. Those always give me the EBGBs when I smell those things. But even like straw or cardboard or grass, like clover honey has a little bit of this herbaceous grassiness to it, but it also has this very signature fruity apple cinnamon pie kind of flavor to it. So anyway, so those are kind of the big things. So the first thing is color. The next thing is give it a whiff, see what you smell out in front of you. Then of course, give it a taste, give it a couple tastes. And the second taste, make sure you get it all over your mouth. And then notice not only that retronasal smell and aroma that's inside of your mouth and comes out of your nose, but also how it feels across your tongue. If you don't have crystallized honey and you have you got the smooth stuff, that'll even have its own texture as well too. Is it more liquidish when it spreads out? Is it a little bit thicker and more viscous? And then finally, notice how long that flavor lasts in your mouth and what that aftertaste is like. So that's a little bit of a tasting. There's lots of resources out there for you to use. I think one of the most important things is that you have, if you're doing this and get into it, you have notebooks. And so I always keep my notebooks with me for keeping a journal on basically the different varietal honeys that I've tasted and keeping some details about them. And besides just trying to taste the notes, it's also important to just give it the hedonic rating. Like, do you like it or do you not like it? I know that we've given the kids buckwheat honey before and Jude spit it out right away, where Tristan was a little bit like, this kind of has a little bit of nuance to it. He kind of appreciated all those different flavors. And at the end of the day, you gotta like the honey that you've got. And I think one of the things that's really fun that you find is as you explore and get to know, all these different honeys, thyme honey, beech forest honey. Oh my gosh, beech forest honey. That actually comes from aphids. When aphids suck on plants, they release excess liquid out their bums. Bees will come and slurp up that honeydew, and they actually turn that honeydew into honey, which is a whole other flavor and texture. But as you start to explore all these different honeys from around the world, you start to get an appreciation and understanding of how you might pair it with cheeses or even mix it into a cocktail like a bee's knees. You can really taste the difference. And so anyway, that's a little bit about honey tasting. I hope that you learned something. Thank you.